Hello and welcome to another League is for Everyone video. Today we're going to be talking about the champions that are available to you when you first start playing the game and also the practice tool. So in addition to the champion that you selected when you finished your tutorial, which could have been Darius, Miss Fortune, Lux, Master Yi, or Ari, I believe, there are other champions that are also available to you when you very first start to try out. And I really recommend trying them. So you find someone you like who feels comfortable, you can see yourself playing a lot of games on and wanting to learn, because it's one of the easiest ways to learn League is to find a champion or a couple champions who work pretty similarly to each other and to learn the game through that lens. And the reason you want to do that is because, like we talked about in the last video, you want to limit those variables. You want to be able to focus on all the new things that can come up during a game, and you want to think as little as possible about what your abilities do, what items you build, and by playing the same champion a lot or the same couple champions a lot who build the same items and work kind of similarly, it just lets you do that, lets you focus on everything else. So we're going to be using the practice tool to explore this today. To get to the practice tool, you go up here and you hit play, and then over here on the tabs you go over to training, and practice tool, and confirm. The practice tool is really cool. I really recommend playing around with it. I'll be showing you a couple of its functions today, but it has a lot more. So feel free to experiment in there. So here are all the champions that you can play when your account is level 1 through 10. As you play more games, your account will level up, and then you'll get access to different champions. But for the first little bit, these are the champions you're going to have access to. So here's Darius, who I started with. He was like my special champion that I chose, but then everyone who's levels 1 through 10 also has access to these champions. So we're going to start with Ezreal. We're going to lock in. And the reason that we're going to start with Ezreal is because he's first in the order. That's the only reason. I'm going to show you all the champions. They're all going to get a turn. And then the reason that we're using the practice tool is because the practice tool, since it's not considered like a real game, it's okay to just quit whenever you want. So you can jump in and try for a little bit and then jump back out as soon as you get a sense of the champion. Whereas if you play a game, like even a versus AI game versus the computer bots, the system is like not happy about you leaving and will say like, oh, don't leave the game, and you're not really supposed to leave games in progress even when they're just against bots. So practice tool is great for that. Okay, so I just kind of sped through this first part. It's a little reflexive, and this is the wrong screen. Okay, here's what you're going to see. Here are the starting items. So it says, this one's a little interesting. So it has Doran's Blade, Doran's Shield, Potion. You'll notice that you only start with 500 gold, right? I only had 500 to start with, and these are both 450. So it's really saying choose between these two. Remember, you don't have to necessarily read the stats. Just kind of think about it. Oh, a sword is more for offense. A shield is more for defense. So if you feel a little bit like you want to play a little bit more defensively, take the shield. If you feel like you want to try to kick in some butt, then take the sword. Since we're in the practice mode, I'm just going to take the sword and a potion and a ward. And then we're going to level up our first ability. Oh, this is also extremely important. You will notice that I have unlocked my camera. This is the default way that everyone plays League. They don't have the camera locked like they did in the tutorials. So if you hit escape and go to hotkeys and then scroll down to camera control, you can select the camera lock button. Mine is on Y. So if I hit Y, it'll lock the camera on me. So this is probably what you're more familiar with. I really encourage you to get used to the unlocked camera. I know it feels awkward to have to move the edges of the screen with your mouse, but it's just really important because sometimes, for instance, Ezreal is a really good example of this actually. Like sometimes you want to aim an ability at someone who's far away, and if you lock the camera on yourself, look, like sometimes it's really hard to aim when it's at the edge of the screen like this. So instead, you want to unlock your camera so that then when you're aiming, you can see a little bit more what's going on. I know it feels a little bit weird, but trust me, that's just the best way to play. And it's kind of akin to dribbling, I would say, in basketball. Although it's a little bit different because it's not required by the rules. So you can have a locked camera, but it's similar in the sense that it's something that it's a little bit hard to learn. It's a little awkward, but it's really a fundamental part of experiencing the game and participating in the game. And if you absolutely have to start with a locked camera, that's okay. But as soon as you can, I would recommend unlocking your camera because honestly, it's just going to make it so much easier. So you can see I'm practicing my skills right here. Practicing killing some minions, just kind of seeing how that works. We want to make sure that we're able to last hit with the champions we choose. So when I use my Q, we already kind of looked at this one. It's a skill shot. That means you have to aim it, and it shoots out a bolt. That. I'm going to take my second ability. This is W. Oh, looks like this is also a skill shot. It looks really similar. I wonder if it works differently. Okay, so that one didn't affect minions. So that's interesting. Looks like I'm level 3 now. Ezreal's level 3 is Arcane Shift. It lets him teleport a short distance. If you hover it, you can see the teleport distance. And then after he teleports, he'll shoot a bolt of energy. Like this. Ha! I get the minion. Okay. Now the W, which we tried earlier, didn't hit the minions. So we need an enemy. There are no enemies on this map, so what are we going to do? We're going to come over here, and we are going to hit the down arrow, and we're going to click Spawn Enemy Dummy. And that's going to let us practice attacking a dummy that would be like an enemy champion. So you can see if I were to use W on a champion, it just attaches to them. But then what happens? Pow! Oh, I did even more damage. So the W doesn't necessarily do more damage, doesn't do damage itself. What it does is it enhances the next amount of damage you do, either from a ability or from a basic attack. So that's what the W does. So that's Ezreal. You can see his auto attack range is pretty long, so he can kind of stand far back. He can hit people with things from far away. He's got 2 skill shots and then the little teleport. The little teleport's also good from running away from people who are trying to kill you. Finally, I'm going to go over here, hit the up arrow, and then click level up twice. And that lets you get levels for free. I kind of cheat a little bit, so I can show you his ult. His ult's pretty exciting. If I hold down R, it's kind of a weird aimer. I wonder what this does. I wonder what the maximum range is. Oh, look, if I push the screen over here, it just keeps on going. What does that mean? Well, let's try it out. Pow! Oh, look at that. And look, it travels all the way across the map. That's pretty cool. So you can get people from way downtown with Ezreal. So that's a little look at how Ezreal works. Okay, now we're going to quit. We're going to try the next champion. So we're going to go play, training, practice tool, confirm, start game. We're going to move on to Kayn.
Will you prove worthy?
So unlike Ezreal, Kayn is a melee champion, which means he attacks from close up. Kayn is normally a jungler in the main game, but you don't really have junglers when you first start playing League. We haven't talked that much about positions yet, but suffice to say that you'll play him a little bit differently when you're first learning him as you might when you're more experienced in the game, but that's okay. He'll totally work. Kayn has this evil sentient weapon. It's a scythe, and Kayn is constantly fighting this internal battle between him and the scythe about who's going to have control. So we're going to buy some items for him, and it recommends we go Doran Shield and then Potion and Ward. So I'll grab those, and I'll take Q first. That's his ability. We're going to walk up here notice also how when I unlock the camera, it lets me look other places, which is kind of nice where, you know, you want to show up to a fight that's happening down here, you can push the camera around and just look rather than having to then go down to the mini-map and drag your camera around to see what's happening. So the unlock camera is really nice for that too. We're going to spawn a enemy dummy just like we did before. We're going to see how this guy works. We're going to hold down Q. Huh. Haven't really seen an aimer like this. Let's see what it does. Slash, slash. And you can see his auto attack range is much shorter than Ezreal's. So he has to really be standing close. We can really beat on this dummy though. Beat on him good. So here come the minions. We're gonna see how the last hitting goes again. Every champion has a slightly different auto attack animation, and that influences how comfortable it feels to last hit. So even two melee champions will have different animations because, you know, Kayn's swinging this big old scythe, and another champion might be swinging a big old hammer or might be punching the minions with their fists, and so it'll always feel a little bit different on every champion, and that's why it's important to try people out and to feel comfortable, because some champions' auto attack animations will just not feel comfortable for you, and it will feel difficult for you to last it with them. So it's important to know just, you know, what kind of animations tend to work well for you. Kayn's next ability is W. Let's take a look at that. Looks like a projectile. Let's see what it does. Ooh, it's like a scythe, like a ranged scythe attack kind of. So that's kind of cool. You can use your abilities to last hit if you want. But remember that your abilities use mana, so if you use your abilities to last hit a lot, you won't have mana to use your abilities to fight. So, consideration. Kayn's E ability is really unique. It allows you to walk through walls, which is very exciting. So I'll go over into the jungle here just to show you a really exciting one. So if I like start out up here on Kayn and I hit E, I can walk through this wall. And when you start walking through the wall, you also gain health, which is pretty cool. So you can use it if you're low on health and need to run away. You can walk through the wall to both escape and regain health back. Or if you want to sneak up on somebody, you can also walk through the wall in order to sneak up on them and fight them. That's pretty cool. Little tower shot. Oh, so now I can show you the heal. So see, I lost a little bit of life, but when I walk through the wall, I heal up. So that's Kayn. We're going to check out his ultimate ability now. The way his ultimate ability works, let me get the target dummy back out here, is if he's recently dealt damage to someone, he can jump inside them. He leaps inside their soul, and then he comes out and deals damage. So if I have done damage to this dummy, you see the little arrows, now I can hit R. If I'm within this range, I can hit R. And my timer keeps running out. Okay. I jump inside the dummy. It gives me a little arrow to decide which way I want to zoom out when I'm done, and then I deal damage to the dummy. That's how Kayn works. The last part of Kayn is that his battle between him and the scythe is represented in him choosing a form during the game. So he starts out looking like this, like regular old Kayn with the scythe, and then I'm gonna deal a bunch more damage to this dummy because that's how you power up which form he has. Basically, if you spend more time fighting melee champions, you'll get more red orbs, and if you spend more time fighting ranged champions, you'll get more blue orbs. So if you get more red orbs, you can choose either mode of Kayn, red mode or blue mode. It's kind of like evolving a Pokemon. But depending on which kind of enemy you spend more time fighting, you will be able to choose one of those modes first. So if if you spend more time fighting melee champions, you'll get to choose red mode first, and then blue will be on a like 3-minute delay. And then if you want to choose blue in spite of that, you can wait 3 minutes and choose blue. Or if you spend more time fighting ranged champions, then you'll be able to go blue form first, and then after like a 3-minute delay, you'll be able to pick red. So red form Kayn is what we call in League of Legends a bruiser, which is kind of like someone who can take a lot of damage but also deal a fair amount of damage. They're very scrappy. And then blue form is a assassin, which is a type of champion that wants to deal a lot of damage very quickly but can't take very much damage. So since we got a bunch of red orbs, I'm just going to show you the transformation quick. When I go home to the fountain, I'm able to choose between the two halves down here. You can see in the status bar, I'm going to click red form, and then you can see there's this very dramatic transformation. Oh my goodness, Scythe killed him. Looks like the evil weapon won that Battle of the Wills, and now I'm this evil Kayn, or dark weapon Kayn, however you want to think about it. So his abilities change a little bit when you transform, but they still mostly work the same. So here's the Q. You'll notice that the W now is going to knock up the dummy, which is a form of crowd control, which means that while it's knocked up and airborne, that character couldn't do anything else. But you can still jump inside them and have a good old time. And then escape by walking through the wall. Kayn's pretty exciting. A lot of potential with him. Easy to make mistakes and die, but as we all know, dying is learning. But then a lot of potential too to just really wreck the enemy team and deal a lot of damage and get away. So he's pretty interesting. So we're going to go ahead and leave the game and go on to the next one. Play, training, practice duel, start game. We're going to load in with Lee Sin this time. Lee Sin is a very complex champion. He has a lot of abilities. He has a lot of potential. I mean, he kind of fits into the same category I was describing with Kayn, where you can potentially do a lot with him, but you can also potentially just hit all the buttons and hit them in the wrong order, and then nothing happens the way you want it to. Very easy to make mistakes on. Also similar to Kayn, he is typically a jungler when you kind of play in a regular 5v5 game with people once you get a little bit higher level. We're going to go to the shop and see that recommends Doran's Blade, Potion, Ward. We're going to start our little queue again. There are many champions who don't necessarily take their abilities in the order of QWE. I've just been doing that because for the purposes of learning, I've just been doing it in that order. But that is not necessarily the optimal order always, and I encourage you to experiment with that and just think about it especially once you kind of land on a champion that you think you're going to play quite a bit. Think about what order it makes sense to take your abilities in, and does it make sense to start E before Q or start W before Q or whatever. It's a kind of thing that it's worthwhile to think about. So Lee Sin has abilities, and we're going to start with the Q. So all of Lee Sin's abilities have two modes. They have the thing they do when you first activate them, and then they have a second thing they do when you hit them again. So that's part of the reason he's so complicated, is he essentially has 6 abilities, or like 6 basic abilities and then his ult. So it kind of has 7 abilities. So the Q, the way it works is hold down Q, you can see the little range indicator. It's pretty long range, probably a projectile. Let's see. Pew! Oh, look. I hit that target dummy. But you'll see when you hit it that something else comes up down here. It's like a little foot thingy. So we're going to wait for this to come off cooldown. Try it again. And then after we hit the dummy with the Q, we're immediately going to hit Q again and see what happens. So aim, Q, Q, and we dash to the dummy. So I misspoke. You don't actually literally hit it immediately after. You wait for the Q to land. So here it's like I wait for the projectile to hit, then I hit Q, and it makes me dash to them. So this is a really exciting ability because if an enemy is trying to run away from you or you're kind of sneaking up on them, it lets you close that distance. And so it's extremely powerful in that regard. The next ability we're going to learn about is the W. So the W lets you jump to an ally or allied ward or an allied minion. So I don't know how much we've talked about wards, but on the 4 key, you can see I've got a vision ward. So if I hold it down and place a ward, and then left click, that's going to let me see around here. Even if I leave the area, the ward is like my little spy friend that tells me what's going on, and so I can still see in this area. Lee Sin's W lets him jump to a ward if he wants to. So you can see the range, and I can jump to a ward. So you can use that to run away. If there's a friendly ward in the neighborhood and you're running from the enemy, you can jump to the ward. If there is a friendly champion, we're going to create a friendly champion dummy. You can also jump to your friend, and you both get a shield, which is pretty nice. And then lastly, you can also jump to a minion. So this is a really powerful ability. When you reactivate W after using it, it gives you lifesteal on your attacks and abilities. So if you're low on health, I'm going to take a tower shot here. Oh, no, not yet. I'm going to take a couple tower shots here. Oh, no. Okay. So I've taken a couple tower shots. That kind of hurt. So now I'm going to hit W on myself and get the shield, because you can also just do it yourself, and then hit W again to get the lifesteal. And then you can see as I hit this dummy, my health went up a little bit because I got lifesteal off of that. The W is also really powerful. I mean, you can just use it so many ways, but here's like another cool trick, right? Is like, let's say there's this enemy that's far away. You want to hit it with a Q, but you're too far. You can jump to your ally and then Q and jump to the enemy. Or likewise, if you're running from the enemy, you can then jump to your ally to run away. So it's such a powerful ability. Hard to use right in the moment, but very strong. His E is damage in a circle around him. You can see, boom, we hit the minions. And then if we reactivate it, then everyone we hit with the E is now slowed. So they'll walk slower, so they're easier to chase down. So another thing you might do is, let's say you want to chase this enemy, you might Q, Q, E, E, and now you've jumped to them and also slowed them down, so that's harder for them to run away. So as you can see, lots of different options with this character. We're going to level up a couple times so I can show you the ultimate. So Lee Sin's ultimate is a kick. And you can kick someone in that range, and then you'll kick them away from you. But just to show you something, like another cool Lee Sin trick, this is a very hard thing to execute during a game, but just as a point of interest, I will show you how it's done. Let's say I want this enemy to be kicked towards my ally. So if I just walk up and kick them, if I just walk up and use the kick, the enemy is going to fly away. We don't want that. We want them to fly towards our ally, because maybe this is a big, scary melee champion who's going to eat them up, because our champions would literally do that. Who will eat you. So I might throw a Q at it, and then Q, and then place a ward down behind it, and hop to the ward, and then kick, and now I've kicked this towards my ally. If this is a scary enemy that's near my ally, I could also use the kick ability to kick it away. One cool thing you can do in Practice Tool, which I'll do right now, is if you bring this out and you click this button at the very top, Auto Refresh Cooldowns, that will mean that you don't have to wait for your abilities to come back. They'll just come back immediately. So if you want to experiment with the kick and kind of see how it works, you can turn this on, and then you'll be able to see that the ability is just ready for use right away. So you might notice, for instance, that this ability can kick people over walls. You might also think, oh, what if I kick them and then Q? So you can kick them and then Q to them. There's so many Lee Sin combos, it's crazy. Very, very complicated character, but very satisfying to play when you get one of those little tricks down right. So we'll be done with Lee Sin. And we will move on to the next one. Oops, not training, or not tutorial, my bad. We're gonna go to practice tool. And we're gonna move on to Morgana. Morgana is a mage, which is a kind of champion that we haven't talked about yet. She's ranged like Ezreal, but her abilities are a lot more important than her auto attacks, her basic attacks. You'll notice when we try to hit the minions that her basic attacks are really weak. By contrast, her abilities are really strong. So mages tend to have that characteristic that their abilities play a much larger part in their importance and their strength than their auto attacks do. They tend to have not very much HP, so they're easier to kill, and they are basically all ranged. So when you open up Morgana, it's going to recommend that you take Spell Thief's Edge and 2 potions, and we're going to talk more about Spell Thief's Edge later. It's kind of a unique item. And we are going to start with our Q ability and see how that works. So we're going to walk to the lane. Morgana is, I'm not sure exactly what her story is. She's like an evil witch. Oh, I think she's like a fallen angel. You can see her like, I think those are her like old wings right there. Yeah, I think she's like a fallen angel. Her sister Kayle is also a character in the game, and Kayle is kind of an angelic figure, and I think they don't get along anymore. So that's too bad. We're gonna check out Morgana's Q. We're gonna make an enemy dummy. Hold down Q, check the range indicator. Whoa! This is a very long range basic ability. Watch out, enemies. Pa-pow! So you'll see that the word rooted appeared above the dummy. That means it can't move. So when you hit someone with your Q, they are not able to move. Morgana's Q is a really great way to set up plays because if you can lock down one of the enemy champions and not allow them to move, then your team can follow up and deal damage to them. So I'll practice CSing a little bit. As you see, my auto attacks do not do very much damage. When you're playing a mage, you have to be so precise to get those last hits, or you can also use your abilities to get the last hits. But just do beware that it is a little bit trickier to last hit with mages. But honestly, if you start on a mage and you learn to last hit well with a mage, you will be able to last hit with anybody because this is the toughest it will get, is last hitting with mages and getting that gold from the minions. So it's just good practice, and don't be afraid to use your abilities when you need to get those last hits. So we're gonna now look at the W with the range indicator. Okay. See what this does. We'll walk back over the target dummy and throw this down. Ooh, it's like it does damage over time. The longer that the dummy is in it, the more damage they take. And then so you can also see the obvious combo here is if you can root them in place and then put them in the circle that does damage over time, they'll take more damage because they won't be able to walk out. So that's a nice little combo. If you're feeling really confident or want to practice something a little bit tricky, you could try throwing out the Q and then placing the W down before it lands. And that way it's very hard for them to react or move out of the W at all. We are going to kill a couple more minions so we can get that sweet, sweet level 3. That one. You can also use this on the minions to help clear the minion wave. If there's a lot of them that you need to kill quickly. So now we're going to need an allied dummy. Well, I guess we could just do it on ourselves. The E is a shield. So if I just put the cursor over myself, see that I get a shield. The shield blocks a little bit of damage, but mostly what is important about the black shield, the absolute most important part of this ability, is that it blocks those crowd control effects. And crowd control effects are the ones that stop champions from doing something. So ones that root them in place so that they can't move, or that stun them so they can't do anything, or that put them to sleep, because that's a thing. The black shield will stop that from happening if you use it before the ability hits them. So for instance, if there was a Morgana on the other team and they put on a black shield on this dummy before my Q hits it, the dummy this character would not be rooted in place. So it's really can sometimes be a very uh, skill testing reaction test to see if you can kind of do it in response to someone using an ability. But if you want, you can just use it yourself to be aggressive and just know that, you put it on yourself, you walk forward and you throw your abilities out knowing that they will not be able to stun you or put you to sleep or root you in place or whatever. So it doesn't always have to be a really big reaction play, but that is certainly one of its most powerful uses. So we are going to level up a little bit so I can show you Morgana's ultimate. And we're going to go over here so I can show you how it works because it actually requires a few more targets. I want you to be able to clearly see. So we're actually going to spawn a bunch of enemy dummies. So if Morgana's surrounded, guess what? She doesn't care. She's going to just hit R. She doesn't even need to aim it. And everyone in this circle is going to be hit with these chains and take damage. And then if they stay in the chains, they're going to get stunned. So it's kind of a cool thing where you can throw the chains on them and make them try to run away. But you can also put the chains on them and then use your Q to root them in place so they can't run away. And then that way, then they're stunned once the chains finish their countdown of how long you have to be stuck before you're stunned. So Morgana, really powerful. Morgana also brings a lot of utility. But what I mean by that is, you can tell with the shield and the root that she can help set up plays for other people. So she herself doesn't necessarily need to be that strong in order to help. She's one of the kinds of characters who can help even if she personally doesn't have a lot of gold or doesn't have a lot of items. So that's pretty cool. And move on to the next one. I'm going to go ahead with Riven. Riven is another melee character. Riven has a lot of mobility. She can move around really quickly, and she's really good at moving across the map in order to help her teammates. If they're in a tough spot or in a fight, she can get there really quickly. Riven is also pretty good at fighting multiple enemies at once if you know what to do and are confident and have a decent gold lead. So Riven can be very exciting. A lot of these early champions they give you levels 1 through 10, they give you some pretty high skill ceiling champions so that if you want to play one of them a lot, it really gives you a lot of latitude, but don't feel like you have to play one of the really skill intensive champions. There's so much skill in this game, even in playing the simpler champions, that I think some people, when they start playing, they get trapped thinking, oh, I want to play one of these really high skill cap champions, and I'm going to put a lot of time into them. Because when you're first learning the game, there's so much to learn. You're going to learn a lot no matter what champion you play. Even if you play the simplest champion in the game with the most basic abilities, you're still going to learn a ton, and there's going to be a lot of room for improvement. So don't feel like you need to play one of the really high skill cap champions to, give yourself enough room for growth or anything like that. For your first 200 to 500 games, honestly, you can play the absolute simplest champions pretty much exclusively, and just one or two of them, and you will learn a ton about the game. So we're going to look at Riven's Q first. Riven's Q is interesting because you can actually activate it up to 3 times as long as you do it in quick succession. So we're going to spawn an enemy dummy over here like we do. So you don't aim it, it's the area damage around Riven. So you can see we hit them, and there's a little timer of when we can do it again. So we do it again. And then the last one, haha, is another knockout. You can see that the dummy went airborne. So that's another piece of crowd control. Means that while the dummy is in the air, it cannot do anything. It has no choices. So Riven is really good at dueling, like fighting one-on-one for that reason, because if you're going back and forth, she has that ability to knock the enemy up and stop them from doing anything. Last hitting with Riven is not super easy, but not super hard. You can use her abilities to kill the minions pretty well. Her auto attack animation never felt supernatural to me, but I know a lot of people really liked her, so that's something that you'll see is that there are just different people and they have different opinions about who's easy to last hit with and whose attack animations feel good, so that's just something that you will need to figure out for yourself. Riven's W is also an ability you don't have to aim. It's a little area stun around her. So this is another piece of crowd control. Stun means the enemy can't move or take any actions. So if I hit W, you can see it says the enemy is stunned. So you can see how potentially Riven can really lock the enemy down if you knock them up and then stun them. You can really take away their choices about how to respond because they're just constantly crowd controlled. They either can't move or can't do anything because they're stunned. Riven's E is a little dash that also gives her a shield. You can see that. That's kind of nice for moving around the map. You can see how mobile Riven is between the dash and then the mobility on her Qs. So for instance, if I want to travel over to this dummy, I can actually use my Qs and dash to get over there quicker. Lastly, we're going to talk about Riven's ultimate ability. Level up twice. Oh, level up 3 times, I mean. She was only level 3. You also notice that Riven does not have mana. Her abilities don't use mana, so you don't really need to worry about that. You only need to worry about the cooldowns, but she never runs out of mana, which is kind of nice. Riven's ultimate is kind of like her Q in that she can activate it twice. The first time you activate it, your sword gets so big and scary, and you get extra attack damage. And then for a short duration, you also have the option to throw out this Wind Slash, which does a bunch of damage and can hit a bunch of enemies. That's kind of cool. It is a neat ultimate ability. First time you activate it just to kind of gain some attack power, and then you can, if they're trying to run away from you, for instance, you can activate the second part to throw out the wave of damage behind them. So we're going to move on. Next champion we're going to look at is Sona. Sona is a healing champion primarily and a support champion. She helps the team and makes the team stronger. She can certainly do damage herself and get kills and fight and things like that, but she's really good at helping her teammates and allowing them to do the things that they're best at. And so her abilities mostly revolve around that. Sona is a musician, and she carries around this interesting instrument. You'll notice Sona also starts with the Spell Thief's Edge, which we'll talk about later, just like Morgana was recommended to. So yeah, you can see Sona has this cool instrument thing. She's got very long hair. Or are those like decorations? I think it's her hair. So here comes Sona. Sona is also going to be pretty difficult to last hit minions with, but you know, like I said, it's really good practice. If you get good at last hitting with Sona, you will be able to last hit with just about anybody, just like Morgana. So if we spawn an enemy dummy, we'll actually spawn a couple enemy dummies. You don't have to aim any of Sona's abilities. Well, actually, that's not true. You don't have to aim any of Sona's basic abilities. You do have to aim her ult. That's kind of nice. So if you hit Q, you can see it's got a pretty big range. It'll shoot out 2 bolts, and they'll automatically find the enemies. So as long as they're in range, it'll just shoot out. It can hit minions, but it'll prioritize hitting enemy champions automatically. So you can't use this to last hit, but if there's a champion there, one of the bolts will hit the champion for sure. So now wait for the minions to show up so we can start last hitting them. You can see her auto attacks do a pretty hiddly amount of damage, but we're going to try to line up a good Q here. Okay, so I got one of those. Get level 2 so I can show you her next ability. Alright, so her next ability is another area of effect ability. I'm going to take a little damage so you can see how it works. It's actually an area of effect heal, and it'll also give a shield. So if I bring up an allied dummy, you'll see that when I hit W, I restore some life, and then me and the dummy get a shield that can block damage for a very short period of time. So that's her next ability, so you can see how that's very helpful in a fight. If a fight's going long and both teams are kind of trading damage back and forth, but neither team can kill the other, if one team has someone like Sona who can heal, that team's going to have a huge advantage because they're able to restore life during that fight instead of having to go home or use their potions or what have you. Sona will be able to do that. So it's very powerful. Sona does use mana, like most of the other champions, but unlike Riven. Sona's third ability is a speed up that lets her move faster, and any allies in the area will also move faster. So if you want to run away, or if you want to chase an enemy, or if you just want to get across the map more quickly, the speed up is really helpful. So you can see that she brings a lot of utility, kind of like I was talking about with Morgana. Sona has even more utility than Morgana. She's even more utility focused and less damage focused. So we're going to level up to level 6 so I can show you the ultimate ability. Sona's ultimate is her only skill shot. You can see it's pretty wide, but it's not super long range. It'll be a little bit less entertaining on the dummies because what it actually does is it makes the enemy champions dance. And there's actually like a little dance animation they do, which is quite funny. I don't think the dummies will actually dance, but you can see I'm going to aim it. And these characters would be dancing for as long as the yellow circle surrounded them. So that's another form of CC, crowd control. Is that you can force them to dance. So while they're dancing, they can't move, they can't attack, they can't use their abilities. So if you can hit a bunch of the enemy team with your crescendo, the ultimate ability, and force them to dance, and that's a time when your team can follow up and deal them a bunch of damage or what have you. So Sona very helpful in team fights. Does not deal a lot of damage herself, but helps her teammates deal a lot of damage. We're going to move on to Tristana. Tristana is a ranged champion, more like Ezreal. She is more focused on her basic attacks, and her spells kind of empower her basic attacks and make them stronger. She doesn't really have any skill shots. She doesn't have to aim very much. And she's pretty safe because, like Ezreal, she has a way to run away, which I will show you. Tristana is also really good at knocking down buildings and destroying towers, which is really helpful because destroying towers gives you gold. And that's also how you win the game, is you destroy their towers and eventually their nexus. So, recommends you start with Doran Shield, Potion, and Ward. We're just going to buy those things. And walk to lane. Tristana is a Yordle, which in League of Legends is this little race of kind of little cute creatures. She's got a very big gun. Tristana has a very adventurous personality. She is pretty cool. I like her a lot. I've played a lot of her for quite a while. So let's see what her Q does. Tristana's Q speeds up her basic attacks. So you can see here's my basic attack speed right now. And if I hit Q, 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 even faster. I don't need to aim the Q. All I do is touch the button. It'll automatically speed up my attack speed. We're going to wait for the minions to come so we can start getting that sweet last hitting gold. Last hitting with Tristana is going to be a little bit easier because of the item she builds. You get some more attack damage. So it won't necessarily be any easier than a mage right away. But as the game goes on, because she builds attack damage and that makes her basic attacks more powerful, that means that last hitting the minions with her basic attacks will be easier. You can see I can hit the minions. Speed up my attacks to help kill them quicker. And then do a little damage to the turret. Minions some more. So I'm going to hit level 2. I'm going to take my W. If I hold it down, I can see it's a little circle, the big range. Well, let's see what happens. Ho-ho! Tristana jumps. You can also use that to jump away, which is a very powerful way of escaping if you find yourself in a tough spot. You can also jump towards the enemy. If Tristana gets a kill or assist after using the jump, then the cooldown will reset and she'll be able to use it right away again. You can also use it to jump over walls. So let's say you're in trouble and there's enemies over here, you can jump over the wall. So that is a very powerful ability. You can see it does have a long cooldown. Her E is not something you aim, it's just a point and click ability. So if I put my cursor over the enemy and hit E, I throw this little bomb on them, and then the more I shoot them, the more I power up the bomb, and then the bomb explodes and deals them damage. The cool thing about the bomb is that you can also put it on buildings. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Works pretty much the same way as with the champion. Kill the minions real quick. Throw the bomb on the turret, the tower, and let power up the bomb. Pow! It deals more damage to the turret. So now we're going to level up. Show you her ultimate ability. Tristana's ultimate ability is not something you aim, it's just a point and click like her E ability. Put your cursor over the enemy, and you're going to blow them away, literally. You knock them really far away. This can be really helpful if there's a scary melee champion who is trying to get on top of her and is really close to her, and maybe you've already jumped away, that didn't work, then you can use the ultimate to then blast them away further and keep yourself safe. So Tristana, very safe champion with both the W and ultimate ability to help her get away from people who are trying to kill her. The ult doesn't do a ton of damage, so you're probably not going to kill people with it. I really recommend mostly using it for escaping or keeping yourself safe or keeping your teammates safe, but you sometimes will kill people with it. Next champion we're going to look at is Veigar. Veigar is also a Yordle like Tristana, but he's an evil Yordle. He's all about being evil, and as you could hear his voice when he was selected, he said, "I will show you no mercy." He really thinks that he's a big evil villain, and that's like his goal in life, is to be this really evil character. So yeah, he's an interesting one. He's quite funny. See, it tells us to build Doran's ring and then 2 potions. And you can see he's got a real funny little waddle. Veigar is a mage like Morgana, but unlike Morgana, he deals a lot of damage. He's got less utility, although he has some, and most of his abilities just do damage. So starting with the Q, hold it down. See, it's got a pretty long range, and I think I made an ally. Let's make an enemy. And you can see that I will hit it with my ability. You can also use the Q to last hit minions. The Q will actually hit up to the first 2 targets that it hits. So you can use it to kill 2 minions at once, because it'll damage the first 2 things instead of stopping when it hits the first thing. So we are going to get ready for these minions. You can see his auto attacks, like Morgana, do not do a ton of damage. And use the Q, and we killed one of them and dealt a bunch of damage to the other. So now we're going to take a look at the W. W has pretty long range and does damage in a circle like this. Ooh. You can also use it to kill the minions. And of course that does damage to champions as well. I'm just going to level up and show you the E and the ultimate. So the E is really interesting. It's got a really big area, but it's really just the edges you care about. Because what happens when you cast the E is you create this cage. And anyone at the edge of the cage is stunned. That's a kind of crowd control. It means they can't move or do anything. So it's a really interesting ability, because if they're in the middle of the cage, they're fine. But if they touch the edge, then they're stunned. So the way you usually use this ability is you've got, your W and your E, or your W and your Q, which are these like skill shots that you have to aim. And so what you can do is you can trap people in the cage, and then if they try to walk towards the edges, they'll get stunned, so it makes it easier for you to aim your skill shots at them. His ultimate, it is just a point and click ability. You don't need to aim it. It just does a bunch of damage, and it does more damage the more health that the enemy is missing. So you want to finish the fights with the ultimate rather than starting the fights with the ultimate, because if you open with the ultimate when they have a bunch of health, it'll do a lot less damage. That's a little Veigar tip. And we can move on to the next champion. We're taking a look at Warwick. He's a wolf character. He's not really a werewolf because he doesn't ever turn back into a guy. But he was a guy once, and now he's kind of mostly a wolf. So I don't know what you call that. He's a character though. Warwick is interesting. He can move across the map very quickly sometimes, but not all the time. He's got some crowd control, which is good. He can take a fair bit of damage. He's also pretty tanky, but he can also deal a fair bit of damage. He's very general. He's melee. He's not ranged. We'll take Doran's shield and a potion. Start with his Q. Warwick's abilities take some getting used to. They're not quite as complicated as someone like Lee Sin, but there's definitely some play to them. You need to get the timing right and the utility right. We'll spawn an enemy dummy up there. So starting with Warwick's Q, this is an interesting one. It's a point and click ability. And if you hold it down, it's a bite. You'll latch onto your target and swing behind them. So you can see if I hold down Q, I like swing to the other side. But if I just put my cursor on them and just tap Q, it's just a bite, and then I don't swing to the other side. So sometimes you want to swing to the other side in order to chase them or to get a better position. It's very contextual why you'd want to do that. It can be very helpful, but you don't always know. One doesn't necessarily know when. And a lot of times you'll find yourself just putting your cursor over the enemy and just tapping Q to give them a good old-fashioned little bite. You can also use the Q to last hit, just chomp down on the minions. You can see he was a guy, but then he got like transformed into this wolf monster with all of this like weird machinery. He's got quite a story, obviously. Warwick uses mana. He actually uses a lot of mana, so you have to be a little bit careful with not using your abilities too much. Warwick's W is really interesting. Has a passive effect that will lead him to low health enemies. So if there's like a low health enemy over here, you would see this trail that would lead to them, and he moves faster towards low health enemies because he's like on the blood hunt. if you hit W, it'll find the nearest enemy and it'll lead you on a blood hunt towards them. So you can see, so here's blood hunt mode, and you can see this trail, and we move faster when we run towards the enemy. This enemy isn't necessarily low health, so that's what the W lets you do, is it lets you just find the closest enemy regardless of whether or not their health is low. But you can see when this dummy's health is low, then I move faster towards it because I'm on the blood trail. So if there's a fight going on across the map and people are losing health and the enemy's losing health, then Warwick kind of gives you this just very natural ability to show up, because he will literally run faster towards the fight if they are below a certain health threshold. Warwick's E is an ability that you don't aim and don't have to click on anything. It's a first you get a shield that reduces the amount of damage you take, and then after 2 seconds, or if you hit E again, he'll howl and scare the people around him. So here's the damage reduction. Here's the howl. Oh, they run away in fear. Fear is another form of crowd control. While the opponents are feared, the only thing they can do is run slowly away. I don't know why they don't want to run away really fast. That would make more sense for being afraid, but who knows? Instead, they run away extremely slowly. So you can see here's the E, and then, oh, they run away. We're going to level up to see Warwick's ultimate ability. So when you get Warwick's ultimate ability, you can see the circle around you, and that shows you the range of your ultimate. And the reason it shows you the range on the screen is because the range can actually change. The range is based on Warwick's movement speed, and it's this leap where he leaps at someone. And so if you remember, what makes Warwick move faster? It's when he's on the blood trail, when he's tracking someone who's low health, or when he hits W. So you'll be able to see that when I hit W and start tracking this enemy, if I move towards them, my circle increases of my range. When Warwick leaps towards them, he suppresses them. Suppression is another form of crowd control. It's basically like a stun. It means they can't take any actions or move. So that's very powerful. Warwick is good at hunting people down, and then if he finds them, he can ult and jump on them and then suppress them so that his team can follow up and help finish them off. But he also does a fair amount of damage himself, so he's also very capable of fighting people as well. So that's Warwick. The last champion who's available for the early parts of your league career when your account level 1 through 10 is Zed. Zed is another pretty complicated champion who is very hard to play well, and it's easy to make mistakes on. But you can do some exciting things with him too. He's an assassin. He has some ranged abilities, but his auto attacks, his basic attacks, are melee. He's very mobile, so he can move around the map very quickly. And he can do a lot of just really tricky, rude things, as we will see. I'll buy items. So go ahead and walk to lane. That is a ninja. Like Lee Sin, we didn't really talk about this Lee Sin, but like Lee Sin, he uses energy rather than mana. Energy and mana are really pretty similar. It's like a resource that you use to use your abilities, but energy tends to regenerate a lot faster, and there's no items that give you more energy. So for mana, you can buy items that give you more mana, but there are no items that give you more energy. So it's a very subtle distinction between them. I'll go ahead and see what this guy does. Zed's first ability, Q, is a ranged ability. If you hold it down, you can see it's a skill shot, so we're going to have to aim this one. It's a shuriken throw. So for a shuriken, just more damage. You can use the shuriken to last at the minions. One thing you can do if you're tired of waiting for the minions to spawn is you can actually speed up time. little thing that's fast forward 30 seconds. And I can bring the minions to lane quicker if you are itching to start last hitting and don't want to wait for them to walk there. In a regular game, before the minions get to lane is when you might be talking with your team about your strategy or just joking around or just kind of buying your items or thinking about what ability you want to take first. In practice tool, we don't need to do much of that. So Zed's next ability, his W, is kind of like a Lee Sin ability in that you can activate it twice and it does different things each time. So the first time you activate the Zed W is it throws out this little shadow. And the shadow's kind of cool because it will also throw out a shuriken. And you can switch places with it. So that leads to all kinds of trickiness. You do more damage if you hit them with both the regular shuriken and the shadow shuriken. You can also use the W to go over walls. So if I throw out the W, I hit W once, hit W again, I swap places with my shadow, and now I'm over the wall. So that can get real tricky. Zed's E is not a skill shot, it's just a damage around him in a circle. He just spins his blades and does some damage. The E is also replicated by the shadow. So if I throw a shadow out here and go Q, E, the dummy is going to get hit by my shadow's E, even though Zed did not. The character was not close to the dummy. So now we're going to take a look at Zed's ultimate, which is very interesting. So the way Zed's ultimate works, I'm going to clear these names real quick because they're bugging me, is Zed's going to dash to an enemy champion and mark them with an X. And he's going to disappear for a second. And then he's going to reappear. And then for about 3 seconds, he has time to deal damage to the enemy champion. And then after that 3 seconds, they're going to take damage from his ultimate ability. So it's damage on delay. And that damage is going to be increased based on how much damage he did in those 3 seconds. So he wants to mark them, deal them a bunch of damage, and then they're going to go pop when they take a bunch of damage from the ult going off after the delay. So one way you might do that, and the R also creates a shadow, so it can get really complicated. Just as a very simple way of executing this, you might throw out a shadow, put your cursor over them, hit R. Now you can see you've got 2 shadows, so when you throw out your Q, they're getting hit by a bunch of Qs, a bunch of Es, and then, I don't know if you saw that little pop, but there was a little pop when they took the final damage off of the ult. So we're going to put on the cooldown refresh thing so that we can see a couple more uses for this, because Zed has a lot of tricks like Lee Sin. We're going to put a enemy dummy under the tower, because that is one of the champions who has the capability to dive under the tower and kill the enemy champion. And one way you might do that is you might throw out a little W, and throw out a Q, and throw out a little E, and then hit them with the ult, hit them with this, and then, oh, yeah, I didn't do that very well. I died, because I wasn't really thinking about it that hard. Let's see, can I respawn myself? Revive, there we go. And I'm going to teleport back. But you can do really clever things, unlike me. That's how you learn, so that will happen to you, I guarantee it, if you try to do this instead. You can do really clever things, like you can dive under the tower with the R, and then hit them with a bunch of abilities, Q, and then throw your W out and switch places with it to get away. That happened really fast, but basically, yeah, it's, you can attack them, W, and then you're out from the tower range. So Zed has all kinds of crazy, tricky things he can do. Very easy to make mistakes on him, but also capable of some really big plays. Can be very frustrating to play because he doesn't have very much health. If he gets crowd controlled, he dies really easily. if he's not able to use his shadows to get away, or you also notice that his shadow swap thing is a pretty long cooldown. Oh, well, I auto-refresh my cooldown so you can't see actually. It's at 22 seconds, so you know, now I'm really vulnerable for 22 seconds while I wait for that to come back up. And if they come to attack me, I have no way to get away. I don't have a lot of HP. So definitely an interesting champion. Great potential, but also a lot of mistakes to be made. It means a lot of learning to be done. So we can leave Zed alone for a second. So those are the champions that are available when you first start playing in addition to the champion you chose. This is a quick review. There are the kind of fighter champions who have a fair bit of health, but and can deal a fair bit of damage, but don't have range. That would be Riven, Warwick, and then the red version of Kayn when you choose red form. Then there are the assassins who have a lot of mobility, can deal a lot of damage, but can't take a lot of damage. That would be Zed and blue form Kayn. There are the mages who have ranged abilities, some amount of utility, and can't take a lot of damage. So that'd be like Veigar and Morgana. There's Sona, who's a support, who is kind of like a mage, but she has just a lot more utility and supportive abilities and doesn't deal very much damage. And then there are the ranged auto attackers like Tristana and Ezreal, who have a lot more power in their basic attacks. And the ones that I would say are a little bit easier to play when you're first starting out would probably be Ezreal, Kayn, Morgana, Riven potentially, Sona, Tristana, Veigar, maybe even Warwick. The really hard ones to play are Lee Sin and Zed. So that's my breakdown of the level 1 through 10 champions. Let me know if you have any questions.